Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Anybody here for the first time or returning after a long absence? What's your name?
Troy, returning after a year.
Welcome back, Troy.
Thank you.
Okay, here in the room, we usually go around and say our names next. I'm George.
I'm Brad.
Troy.
I'm Richard. Kevin. I'm Mike. I'm Jerry. Stephen.
Grant.
Marcus.
And Henry over there. Welcome, everybody. I will introduce our speaker next, Pam Weiss. Pamela Weiss is a dual-lineage Buddhist teacher in the Soto Zen and Theravada tradition and author of A Bigger Sky, Awakening a Fierce Feminine Buddhism. She sits on the Spirit Rock Teacher Council and teaches through San Francisco Insight, San Francisco Zen Center, and Brooklyn Zen Center. Pamela lives in San Francisco with her husband and little dog, Grover. Welcome, Pamela.
Good morning. Nice
Morning.
to be here with all of you. Those of you on little boxes and those of you sitting in chairs or cushions. I'm here in my house in San Francisco with my little dog, Grover, who will be listening in on the Dharma talk this morning. So I wanted to share some reflections about what it means to engage in a spiritual life. What does it mean to walk a spiritual path? And this has been up for me in my own reflection, in large part in response to looking out at the world and seeing enormous divisiveness and churn and difficulty and isms and war and so on. And I think for many of us, we come to spiritual life, to spiritual practice, often from a place of suffering. It may be physical suffering or emotional or mental or relational or existential suffering, that we discover that the way that we've been engaging in what we might call regular life either is creating some difficulty, some distress, or even in the best case scenario, when things are going really well, is somehow missing something. That even when things are running along relatively smoothly, we may find that there's something missing, that there's a sense of depth, of meaning, of purpose, of something like that. So sometimes it's described that what we would call the regular world, the material world, the capitalist world that we are engaged in is a path in which we are riding across the surfaces of things, that we are moving in a horizontal plane, that our energy, our effort is all about getting from here to there. And that is propelled by a feeling of wanting something. Sometimes wanting or desire, which is the second noble truth of grasping. It's given that a bad rap, right? And I don't know that wanting is actually so bad, but the problem is that we're looking in the wrong direction. Right? That no matter how fast we go, no matter how accomplished we become, no matter how many shiny objects we accumulate in our lives, it doesn't actually fill the real yearning that we have as human beings, which is a yearning to be ourselves, to be seen, to be loved, to connect with our own hearts, with other people, with the planet. And what we see all around us is in many ways the opposite, right? We see so much division, divisiveness, hurt, harm, like that. So when we come to spiritual life, if you're anything like me, you think, oh, I'm going to get something. I'm going to become somebody different, or I'm going to get from here to there. And this is just bringing our normal kind of material mind into our spiritual life. And actually, I think that what spiritual life does is it doesn't give us something. It transforms our thinking. It transforms our relationship to the world, to each other, to even with ourselves. So that instead of getting from point A to B, instead of getting from here to there, our practice is just about being here. Instead of me becoming a better version of myself, I just actually become more myself. That there's a way in which we are confused when we enter a spiritual path and thinking we're going to get something. And actually, all of spiritual life is about letting go, about really being stripped away. I always have the image that comes up when I talk about this of, Michelangelo and the block of stone. And it's like that in spiritual life. It's not that we get something. It's not that we become something bigger or better. It's that spiritual life chisels us away until what's left is just this kind of purity, this essential essence of who we are that is itself not encumbered. Suzuki Roshi, who is the founder of San Francisco Zen Center, where I teach sometimes and where I did my original years of training, he talked about this as no gaining idea. That the idea in our practice is that we should have no gaining idea. And if you don't have a gaining idea, which most of us do, then what happens is we keep getting thrown back. That instead of moving horizontally, we're asked to drop vertically. And Dogen Zenji, who is the founder of Soto Zen, who was Suzuki Roshi's teacher. Dogen Zenji was a Japanese poet, philosopher, monk who lived in the 13th century. And he has this beautiful phrase that has been stirring in me. He says, realization. By realization, he means basically waking up, having some insight. Realization is effort without desire. So what this means is realization is our full and wholehearted engagement here. It's our full and wholehearted engagement without trying to get someplace else, without the desire, without grasping. And of course, in Buddhist teaching, grasping is one side and aversion is the other. These are two sides of a coin. The Buddhist philosophy, psychology actually teaches us that every moment of our lives, we are being bombarded by pleasant and unpleasant phenomena. It's a sort of technical term. But we know this in our own lives, as moment by moment, we are engaging with pleasant and unpleasant sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and experiences, thoughts, feelings, other people, jobs, newspaper headlines, and our usual strategy. And this is not a criticism. It's just if we really pay attention to how most of us are engaging in our regular lives, our strategy is that we're trying to get as much pleasant experience as we can. Pleasant, I like it, I want it, grab on. And we're trying to get away from as much unpleasant experience as we can. Unpleasant, I don't like it, I don't want it. Push away. And we imagine this is at the heart of grasping and aversion, which are two of what are called the three poisons. And by poisons, it just means the energies that cause the mind to be in a state of churn, right? So grasping and aversion, but at the center of grasping and aversion is delusion or confusion. So the reason that we're grasping and averting, avoiding, pushing away all the time is because we have this often unexamined idea that if only I could, simply put, grasp and push away enough, better, faster, stronger, more, then fill in the blank. Then I would be happy. Then I would be at peace. Then people would like me. Then this is what an old teacher of mine used to call, we have this delusion of often unconscious in our minds of the island where it all works out. So we're carrying this fantasy in our mind that somewhere there's this place, probably not an actual physical place, but there's a state of being in which we're no longer being bombarded, or we're no longer being bothered by pleasant and unpleasant and grasping and so on. And we imagine when we come to spiritual practice that now I have the solution. I'm going to just meditate, and now I'll find the island. And when we don't find the island, then we look for something to blame. Many of us blame ourselves. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not a good enough meditator. I'm not a nice enough person. I'm not whatever your version of that is, right? Or we find somebody else to blame. If only those people at the Gay Buddhist Fellowship had a longer sitting or a shorter sitting or more frequent sitting or better speakers or better technology or whatever it is, we find something to blame for why it is that we can't find this fantasy island. And all the while, spiritual life is asking us to be here, to find our seat, to find our feet, to find our heart on planet Earth, not on the island. And for many of us, certainly for me, there is some resistance to giving that up, to giving up that fantasy. And yet, that stripping away, while there may be some grief, some loss, some feeling of anxiety perhaps involved, there's also just tremendous relief. Oh. So here's the end of the piece from Dogen. He says, realization is effort without desire. Wholehearted engagement without trying to get somewhere, without trying to be someone, right? And then the rest of his little poem says, clear water all the way to the bottom. A fish swims like a fish. Vast sky, transparent throughout. A bird flies like a bird. And these images, these beautiful images of being at peace in our element, right? The fish gets to be a fish. The bird gets to be a bird. And you get to be you. This is the gift of spiritual life. And if you're anything like me, you may fight this for some time. But no, I want it better. I want the shiny version. I want the better version. I want the one where, my knees don't hurt, or my heart doesn't hurt, or I have more friends, or I make more money, or I am taller or shorter, or whatever it is, right? And finally, bit by bit, we're willing to land. And this is really the heart of our practice. This is what we're practicing when we sit. Can I be here? Can I be here? Can I allow myself to be the bird or the fish or the gorilla or the giraffe or the whatever the being is that is you? Can you give yourself that? So I thought I would share with you a teaching and a little bit of a story to unpack kind of a description of the unfolding of spiritual life that I was introduced to really somewhere in the very, very beginning of my own kind of spiritual searching. In the very early days when I was in my 20s and came to San Francisco Zen Center. So this is 30 plus years ago. And I heard a talk by a guy named Masao Abe. He's a Japanese philosopher, translator, teacher. And he gave this talk. And I actually don't remember very much of what he said. I do remember the core teaching, which I'm going to share with you. But what I do remember was how I felt. And I remember sitting we were in the dining room at San Francisco Zen Center, and this little man who was speaking very quietly and slowly was unfolding this teaching. And each step I felt like, like a part of the stone in Michelangelo's carving was getting chipped away. And I just was like, I have no idea what this guy's saying, but wow, something was revealed. So I am not going to pretend that I can be him. I'm going to be myself in this, but I wanted to share with you this teaching, and we'll see what's revealed for you. So the teaching comes from an 8th century Zen master. Master is a tricky word these days. I think in its original meaning here, master is not about mastery over. It is about being masterful, right? Being accomplished at something. So this guy in the 8th century, he was a Chan, which is the kind of Buddhism that precedes Zen in China. His name was Qing Yuan. And this is what he said. When I first began to practice, mountains were mountains and waters were waters. After I had practiced for some time, mountains were no longer mountains and waters were no longer waters. After I attained or reached final peak, basically after he woke up, he said, mountains were once again mountains and waters were once again waters. And then he asks the ultimate Zen koan, which is, are they the same? Are the first mountains the same as the third mountains? The third paragraph. And you can watch to see what your mind does with that question. Yes, no, maybe, both, yeah. Right. This is our binary mind. It's always wanting to put things here or there. And again, our practice is this invitation to straddle real life, which doesn't fit into categories, which is alive. So here's a pass at a description of what these three dimensions of our practice look like. When we first come to practice, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. This, we could say, is just a description of the relative, dualistic world of samsara. It's the world in which we look out and we see separate, solid, unchanging objects. These are described here as mountains and waters, which could stand for everything. So we're moving through our life and we're bumping up against mountains and waters. Mountains are over there and I'm over here. You're over there and I'm over here. And then we start to notice, as I said, that it's not that satisfying. That if we pay attention, if we look beneath the surface, we begin to feel there's some kind of yearning that we don't want to be so far away from our experience. We're not happy having mountains be over there. We want to feel the mountain that's in here. And so we begin practice. Another way to say this is that we are living in this first set of mountains in a world of concepts. That we're not having a direct experience. We're living in the idea of a mountain. We're living an idea of me, an idea of you, an idea of the world. And that gap between the concept and the direct experience, again, creates a kind of ache in us. Of course, the particular idea in Buddhist teaching of I, me, and mine is understood to be really at the center of our suffering. That we turn ourselves into a separate, solid, unchanging object. And then we start to feel ourselves really in a tight little box. And it starts to get really uncomfortable. There's a beautiful opening. I may have said this before at a talk at GDF, I'm not sure, but there's a beautiful opening of a book called The Hungry Road by a Nigerian author named Ben Okri. And the opening line of the book goes something like this. It says, in the beginning, there was a river, and then the river was paved over and became a road. But because the road was really a river, it was always hungry. So we have this alive life, this flowing river of life. And the idea here is that we pave over it with our concepts and our ideas. And then, maybe the road that we pave over helps us get from point A to point B much faster. So we become efficient, we become accomplished, we achieve a lot, we can move around, but we're moving from place to place and we notice that we're hungry because we've forgotten the river. We've forgotten that there's a whole world that's a living world, right? So all of this is built into mountains are mountains and waters are waters. Those are the waters that have been paved over, right? So then at some point in our life, and this may happen through practice, and for many people, I think it doesn't. I think it happens in nature. It happens in relationship. It happens all kinds of ways that we get a glimpse, we get a taste that there's something more. And it's not that there's something more that we're going to get to by going faster down the road we've built. It's that there's something more when we have the opportunity to pause and to drop below the surface. And suddenly the world goes, oh, there's vast sky. There's bottomless ocean. We feel the dimensionality of our life rather than just living in the flatland of our concepts, of our ideas, of our dualistic subject-object world. We feel something full and whole. And in spiritual life, at least in Zen practice, has the odd term of emptiness, which sounds like some big nihilistic void. But really what's meant in emptiness is this sense of, oh, when the ideas fall away, when we see that things aren't rigidly held, we actually see the aliveness of our life. Now here's the thing. Nagarjuna, who was sometimes referred to as the second Buddha, and he's the main teacher, or he's supposed to be the main teacher of the teachings on emptiness. And he said something funny, like those people who cling to emptiness are intolerable. So sometimes what happens for us is that we get a little taste of something which is so beautiful and expansive and magnificent in some way, and then we grab onto that, right? We take it as an identity, or we chase after it, which was definitely what happened for me in my early days of practice. I had some situations where I sat very deeply and things opened, and then, and I just went running after those experiences, and it was miserable, because chasing after things is always miserable, whether you're chasing after money or chocolate or spiritual experience. So when we cling to emptiness, when we cling to our spiritual experience, when we make it into an idea, we can become intolerable. It's actually called, in Zen literature, it's referred to as Zen sickness, right? It's kind of the person who's holier than thou, who refuses to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty in the regular world because, we wouldn't want to touch that. This is a misunderstanding of spiritual life. It's a partial understanding. There's some insight, but it's distorted. So we don't stay in mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. The final piece that he describes is that we return. And mountains are once again mountains. And waters are once again waters. We re-enter the regular world, but we have a new perspective. And that new perspective is wide enough and deep enough that we can see the innate beauty of mountains and waters. We can learn to engage with life itself without so much grasping and pushing away, but instead from a place of appreciation, which doesn't mean we become passive. It doesn't mean that we don't stand up for injustice. To the contrary, it actually means that instead of being in the reactivity of wanting and not wanting and liking and not liking and grasping and aversion and judging, and we can respond in a wholehearted way. We can make a full effort, a wholehearted effort without being attached to having to get things to go our way. But it's that whole engagement that now becomes possible. And this final part of mountains are mountains and waters are waters is it's sometimes referred to as a teaching of suchness. or thusness. One of the names of the Buddha is the Tathagata. You may have heard that term. And the term Tathagata, ta, means he who has thus come. And really what this teaching of suchness is pointing to is that stone block that has been chipped away. It's the place in which we've let go, and that the simple purity of our experience can be revealed. It's not an easy thing to describe, but probably most of you have had some experience of that. There's a term again, from Zen of just. And just means points to this kind of simple purity. So in Soto Zen, the meditation practice is called shikantaza. And it's often translated as to just sit. And to just sit means let everything else fall away. It's in this spirit of letting go, this just. We meet our experience right on the mark without piling on. And you know what we pile on. We pile on our ideas and our beliefs and our opinions and our meing and our wanting or voiding. And when that begins to soften up, we can meet each other, we can meet the world in a very different place. So this is what's being pointed to in this, I think, what's being pointed to in the second kind of mountain. I was thinking how we can see this in very mundane ways. That, we see this in nature, we see it in the arts, we see it in music, we see it. I studied calligraphy for some time, and there's the idea that for a long, long time when you're learning Chinese calligraphy, you're just making a single stroke. And at some point, that single stroke becomes pure, that all of my ideas about how it's supposed to be, and I'm trying to copy how somebody else did it, and I have opinions and judgments about it, and at some point just, phew. You see this in sports, you see this in dance, in athletes, that kind of stripped away beauty. And if I were going to give a purely mundane example, I was given tickets on Friday night to go see basketball. And so I was at Chase Center and I watched the Warriors play the Houston Rockets. And I saw Klay Thompson hit, I think it's 13 3-pointers, right? 3-point shots. And you may or may not care about basketball, but there's something about seeing someone who is so good, watching this guy hit his basketball stroke, which is so pure. It's really a thing of beauty. And that can come, again, it can come in the mundane world of basketball. It can come watching a sunset at the ocean. It can come watching someone on stage, doing a pirouette or running. And it can come for us when we have these moments that all of that gaining idea, all of that wanting to get somewhere falls away, even briefly. And we can just be in this breath. We can just be here, right where we are. So I'm going to pause because we have some time for reflections or questions, anything that you want to ask or say. We'll open the floor for a little bit. Like Steve. Oh, Chris and then Steve. Okay. Please, Chris.
Thanks so much, Pam. You give such juicy talks. You give so much to think about. I wouldn't have understood you at all earlier in practice. It took me years of falling off the cliff to finally go, wow, she's really talking the Dharma. This is hitting close. We have this term in nursing we used to call this sort of Zen sickness. In nursing, we call them the sacred vessels, the nurses that never make a mistake. They always have a clean bed. Their charting is always beautiful. It made me kind of think of that. Also, living at the Zen Center, I definitely ran into Zen sickness, and it was kind of scary because I would try to compare myself to the people that seemed so bodhisattva-like that I wasn't quite there yet, but then realizing they didn't seem to know how to flush toilets or just some basic stuff. So anyway, it made me kind of think, most recently for me, by the way, when you said Masao Abe, I've heard his name brought up a lot, so I quickly looked him up on Wikipedia. He's got a really intense history. He's worth looking up on Wikipedia if people are interested. He was a philosopher in Kyoto and was the head of a certain school of philosophy and sort of compared a lot of religions. I'm going to go back to it later. Most recently, as my body's falling apart, life seems to be falling apart. My ideas of democracy are falling apart. My idea of war, peace, things like that are falling apart. This idea of letting go, I've always tried to bring it back when I know I'm holding tight, really tight on a concept, tight of what I'm grasping and wanting to get, etc. And then it was sort of losing its punch, the idea of letting go. But now I've been just using, most recently, just letting things fall apart, just letting them fall apart. And I did a lot of improvisational dance when I was young and did a lot of art projects. And I know when you improvise with art, when you improvise with dance or movement, you improvise with your life, the beautiful creative things really will arise. And it's just that ability to see it and let go of that habitual pattern. And this idea of letting go, but in the sense of just letting it fall apart, has kind of really started to help me move through the day when things seem to be getting really tight, and et cetera. So thanks so much for what you brought up. You have gave me a lot to think about. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking I've heard another teacher offer this hand gesture as a way of speaking to that. And the idea is this is pushing away and this is holding on. And what I was describing as letting go is sometimes also referred to as just letting be. And it's just opening the hand. It's a quality of enormous receptivity, which, in your case, you're describing as letting things fall apart, but we're opening to what is without the push away or the grab on. And it's, for me, that gesture is often a helpful way to remind my body, right, of how to do this, because it can be confusing and like, how do I let go? Right. But there's a posture in it. And from my perspective, that's a lot of what we're practicing when we do meditation. We're literally taking a posture of receptivity, right? In which we're allowing whatever's here to be here and to be known. And we're watching our reactivity. We're watching our mind grasping and pushing away. And it's fine. It can do that, but it's not the only thing that's happening. We're discovering that deep water, that vast sky for ourselves.
That made me think.
Thank you.
Things that sort of just guilt Franz often teaches like that grasping, or it's like opening the hand of thought. And by doing that, I kind of taken that a little further. I kind of open and think there's like a butterfly there they can watch for a moment. And then and if you grasp it, it'll fly away. But if you just look at it and wait for it to kind of fly away. I spent a number of years in Japan. I taught English and then went back and forth studying Ikebana. And if you go to temples, well, you're talking about calligraphy. If you go to temples, some of the bigger temples, there's usually a calligrapher there, and people go by to get a signature from those calligraphers. And if anyone does get a chance to go to the big temples of Japan, it's such a beautiful thing to watch because these guys are really good. You know, they've got the big old brushes and they do such creative symbols and strokes. It's a beauty to watch them create them. Anyway, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we ask questions here too?
Sure. Peter.
Do we just do it, or do I have to? Hi. Hi, Pam.
Hi. I can't see you, but I can see the room.
Okay, my name's Peter. Hey, Pam. I'm not sure if you can see me. I want to kind of tell on myself, I guess. I came over here hoping to see you here today. So I gave him his fellowship that we're having a party here, so you're missing out. But you know, it's great. It's great to see you, and I guess what I wanted to talk about more seriously is I feel like I've had trouble, and you're probably sick of hearing these kind of questions. It's about the pandemic, it's just created, in a way, for me, it's just created more obstacles, I think. At first it felt like, oh, I got all this time to meditate now, when we were sort of hunkered down. But now it's like, I don't know, I am really glad to be here with a group that's practicing, and I find the whole Zoom thing kind of problematic, I guess, So anyway, I really appreciate your teachings, and I think you're the Clay Thompson of Dharma teachers.
I will take that as a grand compliment. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
The Clay Thompson of the Dharma. Okay, I'll go for it. Yeah.
I think you guys have a few things to learn about life, but anyway, well, I won't go there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's great to see you, and maybe I'll become a regular here at the fellowship on Sunday.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we have Steve here on my screen.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Hi. Thank you so much for your talk today. I'm relatively new to Buddhism, and you sort of, how should I say, encapsulated the whole thing for me in a way. Not what I'm trying to seek or, to grasp, but just, the way to be, and that I'm missing or realizing I don't have, and I want to feel that more and more. I have glimpses of that. I'm an amateur poet, and I am in my poems. I try to encapsulate this feeling that I'm sort of grasping for, but not grasping for, but wanted to be to overcome the grasping, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so what it resonated with me when you were sharing your poem and about the bird and the fish and the mountains, the analogy of the mountains and the water. And it just made me understand more what I'm trying to be or trying to search for, to let go. So I don't know how to better explain it than that, but I just thank you so much for your talk today. It was really, I took a lot of notes and you give me a lot to think about, and thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I think certainly poetry is a great example of, I have written a book, and I've taken a pass at trying to be a fiction writer, which was maybe the hardest thing I ever did. And I have so far failed pretty miserably. But the thing is that poetry or fiction or basketball or calligraphy, all of those, the expression of all of those come from this stripped down place in which we're willing to be freed of our grasping, our aversion, our ideas and opinions and beliefs and felt sense of separation. And when that happens, in my experience, when I was trying to write fiction, when that happens, then there's a beautiful sentence would appear. And it was almost always a complete surprise, right? Which is one of the characteristics, I think, of this kind of quality that is being pointed to here, is that it's not what we expected, right? It's something that our usual gaze is, as I said at the beginning, trying to get from here to there. And when we find ourselves, instead of getting from here to there, landing here, and then the bottom drops out and we go, ooh, and we're here. Oh, then something can come up out of that, right? A beautiful poem, a beautiful word, something real, which is, for each of us, we get to be ourselves fully in that way. That, the fish and the bird swimming along. You get to be you in that very same way. But the orientation, and I think the shift in orientation, is at the heart of what spiritual practice is about. We think that we want different rivers and different mountains. We think we want a different person than we are. That's not what we get. What we get is a change in our relationship to mountains and waters. What we get is a change in relationship to ourselves, to each other, and to the suffering of the world, which isn't a relationship in which we're either bracing against it or running around trying to fix it. It's a creative response. It's a full response that probably will surprise us. I'm going to close with a short poem that speaks to this. This is from the Therigatha, which is the poems of the early Buddhist nuns. And this one is from Dhammadina, who was one of the leaders of the nun Sangha. And she describes her efforting and then the letting go of that effort and what happened. She says, "For so long, I thought only of the river's end." In other words, she's trying to get somewhere, right? "For so long, I thought only of the river's end. Then one morning, I set my paddle down to watch the sun rise over the eastern hills, only to find myself floating somehow gently upstream. I promise it was not what I expected." So I will close with that. And thanks to all of you for bringing your full selves this morning. And I will hand off to whoever it is who's making announcements to close the day.
Thank you, Pamela. Along that vein, do we have announcements in the room? Jerry.
Hi, I'm your host today. There's hot water for coffee. When you finish with your cup, you can put it in the sink and I'll take care of it. There's some refreshments. At 12:30, people gather at the back door to go to lunch. Anybody's welcome. Donna's at Hollywood Forgiven. I'll be going around with Donna Hall, and people on Zoom, you go to the PDF website, there is a place that says donate, and you go to that, and it'll give you either an address to send a check or to give through PayPal. Let's see. There is a sign-up sheet for newcomers on the credenza. And I think I got everything. Oh, next week our speaker will be Ian, I think it's Chalice. And you can look, if you want to know about him, you can look on the website.
Thank you, Jerry. Richard.
Yes, our newsletter coordinator, Jack Leslie, is not well, so we're postponing the putting it all together and mailing it till next week. So if anyone could plan on being here to help do that, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else with announcements? Hi.
I have an announcement.
Yes.
George.
Okay.
Hi, it's Tom Bruin, everybody. Hey, I just wanted to let everyone know two things. First of all, we have added 3 really great features to the website that I think will benefit you all. I announced these on our Google group by email and also on the Facebook page. And they are, you can now subscribe to the calendar of upcoming speakers. And if you go to the calendar page, those will automatically be added every Sunday onto your whatever calendar you use, so you'll know what speaker is coming up which week. And then there are 2 search features. One, you can go to the, it's called the podcast page where all our talks are, and you can search by any keyword, speaker name, title of the talk, just words used in the description of the talk. And then there's also a search feature on the newsletter page, which allows you to search within our archive of PDFs. So you can find, there's a lot of great articles on there. And so whatever topic you're looking for, you'll be able to find that. That's the first announcement. The second one is that Sean Fight Oaks spoke a couple weeks ago, and he talked about an upcoming course that he's doing at Spirit Rock. And so the registration is open, so I'm going to post a link to that in the chat.
Thank you, Tom.
I'm sorry, but I forgot to say that I also will be teaching next weekend at Spirit Rock, and I'm doing a weekend retreat called Embracing Darkness. So you are all warmly welcome to go to the Spirit Rock website and check that out. I forgot that I was doing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Also, I would welcome your healing thoughts this week. I'm having surgery on Tuesday. And I'm also your facilitator next Sunday again, so I'm hoping that the surgery goes well so that I can be here next Sunday and do this again. Thank you. Shall we gather together for the dedication of merit?
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.